All right, we're going to call the meeting to order. I'm going to take a roll call real quick. Mayor Pro Tem, you here? Councilman Reinbach, you here? Councilman Anderson, you here? Councilman Barnett, you here? Councilmember Spears, you here? Councilman Waddell, you here? And the chair's here. Before we begin the meeting, I just want to also welcome back John Joy, who's back here in the very back. Welcome back, John. Good to see you, buddy. Okay, we have the C1 is a consent agenda. C2 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with North Carolina Department of Transportation for year 2024, section 5303, planning grant to support wave transit. C3A is a resolution authorizing the city manager to apply to the United States Department of Transportation promoting resilient operations for a transformative, efficient, and cost-saving transportation program for a planning grant to develop a regional resiliency improvement plan on behalf of the Wilmington Urban Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. C3B is a resolution supporting the Wilmington Urban Area Metropolitan Planning Organization's application to the United States Department of Transportation promoting resilient operation for transformative, efficient, and cost-saving transportation programming for planning grant to develop a regional resiliency improvement plan. C4 is a resolution to authorize amendment number 1 to the contract for additional parking management services with Pivot of NC LLC. C5 is a resolution approving a lease amendment with the General Services Administration for the use of 7 on-street parking spaces. C6 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 5-year agreement with Granicus Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $405,000. Public information, then we have public hearings. PH1 is amending the official zoning map of the city to rezone property containing 23.33 acres of land located at 3818 Carolina Beach Road and 3930 Independence Boulevard from R15 Moderate Density Single Dwelling District to MD17 CD High Density Multi-Dwelling Residential Conditional District for a 257 unit residential development.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
This item is going to be tabled until the September 5th meeting.
September 15th?
5th.
Okay, very good. Resolutions are: 1 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Cape Fear Commercial LLC for leasing services related to 929 North Front Street. R2 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with St. Moritz Building Services Incorporated in the amount of $425,000 for housekeeping services at 929 North Front Street. R3 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Otis Elevator Company in the amount of $98,000 for elevator maintenance and repair services at 929 North Front Street. And R4 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Sun State Security LLC in the amount of $170,000 for security services at 929 North Front Street. R5 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 3-year agreement with Brady Train Services Incorporated in the amount of $459,564 for HVAC maintenance and repair services at 929 North Front Street. And that concludes this agenda.
This morning we have a presentation by Ms. Amy Beatty regarding the Market Street tree risk mitigation and replacement plan.
Good morning, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. Staff wanted to make Council aware of a tree risk mitigation project upcoming on Market Street, which is being performed as in order to mitigate a safety hazard. The area in question is, like I said, on Market Street between 12th and 21st Street. The trees have been assessed by our 2 ISA certified arborists on city staff, Aaron Reese and Kelly Blair. And they have determined that they're recommending 17 trees to be removed entirely. 2 additional trees need further aerial evaluation, and they may be recommended for removal as well. Unfortunately, these are large, mature trees. They range from 13 to 55 inches in trunk diameter. All of the trees except for 1 are laurel oaks. At your last City Council meeting, you adopted the urban forestry management plan, and with that plan, there was emphasis on right tree, right space. Laurel oaks, decades ago, were heavily recommended to be street trees all throughout the southeastern United States because they're fast-growing, they tolerate poor soil conditions, and they do provide a great amount of shade. We now know, decades later, that these are not great trees to be recommended for our area. They have a shorter lifespan than other similar trees. And a lot of that is actually due to their rapid growth. They perform, or they have structural defects that are a result of that rapid growth, which turns into heart rot, which is caused by multiple fungi species, and it is unfortunately untreatable. Like I said, the average lifespan is 80 years, with the heart rot typically settling in around 50 years. The trees in question that we're talking about today are all in that age range of 50 to 80 years. The removers will be largely performed in-house. We may have to get some contractor help with a few of the larger trees, and the stumps will be ground immediately as the trees are removed. Project location map here, this is from 12th to 15th Street. This is, as you can see, in the neighborhood of New Hanover High School. A little bit further up, this is 16th Street to 19th Street. The two green dots on this map are the two trees in question that will require additional evaluation. And then finally, from 19th Street to 21st Street. Here are some photos of the particular trees in question. A little bit hard to see on the screen, but you have this in your packet. This displays significant decay in the crown and in the trunk of the trees. Whoops, sorry about that. Again, showing structural defects. That first picture right there is actually of a dead tree that's still standing.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
can you elaborate on the structural defect? Amy, what's the difference between the structural defect and the, I mean, if a tree is decaying and rotting, get it, but if it's just, is it just growing weird, growing awkwardly? What's the terminology mean there?
I will ask staff, the technical staff, to answer your question, and I can invite them up now or wait until the
wait till the
end of
end.
the presentation. Okay. So we will coordinate, this is a state-owned road, so we will coordinate with NCDOT on the closure, on the traffic control, rather. We're looking at both weekday and weekend work. Obviously, the goal there is to have as minimal impacts as possible, and we'll establish the timeline with NCDOT. We have been informed by NCDOT that because these are in the historic overlay district, that it's going to require approval from SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Organization. So with all that coordination and permission, I imagine it's going to be several months before we actually get to this project. We are working with communications on a public information campaign that includes a video that we'll show at the end of this presentation. We have informed and presented this project to the Wilmington Tree Commission, and the commissioners were very supportive and actually requested and volunteered to help us with education and outreach as needed. Fortunately, we do have a replacement plan associated with this project, and to overview that plan, I'm going to invite up Sally Thigpen, the Community Services Assistant Director, to overview that plan.
Thank you, Amy. Good morning, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. One of the foundations we learn about in urban forest management is that you replace the trees that you remove. That is no different here. So we do plan, if we're able to remove them later on this year, to replant them in the spring, mid-spring of 2024. This will be a tree-for-tree replacement by contract. We already have funding in place for that contract, and it will include an 18-month watering requirement that'll help the trees not only survive but also thrive along this important corridor. The focus will be on large maturing native tree species such as live oak. I'll give you a couple of other options in just a minute. And we'll be looking at that 3-inch caliper size. One of the reasons that we recommend this size is because the size of the root ball when those trees are dug is set, and the planting space needs to be 2 to 3 times larger than that root ball, so we need to make sure that there's adequate space for those trees to be installed correctly. So from 12th to 21st Street, we're going to recommend live oaks. There are some great planting spaces there that do not have overhead lines that'll accommodate these wonderful native oak trees. Between 12th and 17th, we're going to recommend a variety of species. You may have heard about the emerald ash borer this morning on the news. While we are not concerned with emerald ash borer for our street trees specifically, we do not have very many. It is really important to maintain species diversity in our street trees so that no one disease or insect can wipe out a single species of trees. So some of the trees that we'll recommend are urban tolerant and proven in this area. The overcup oak is in the white oak family. Nuttall oak is in the red oak family. We have also had good success with the hybrid American elms and trident maples, which do well in slightly smaller rooting spaces. They're a bit smaller, but they offer some great fall color, and that's always nice to add to our urban canopy. So here's some examples of what about a 3-inch caliper range tree is going to look like at installation. These are actually along Market Street now. And you see the quote there, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. So with your support, we can move to the next step, planning logistics with our partners. As Amy mentioned, we do have a short video that we can show, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions from the council. So trees are living things, and the city is a tough environment to live in. There's little soil, tight spaces for roots to grow, and often urban trees are not going to live as long as other trees in a landscape. As urban foresters, we're tasked to plan for that, and that may mean that when the time comes, those trees need to be removed. When it's time to plant a new tree, oftentimes we'll make decisions to pick a new species that is more suited to urban conditions. Replanting ensures that our urban forest is resilient and will stand the test of time.
Recently, 18 trees along Market Street were identified for removal. Aging and diseased trees pose a serious risk to public safety. Replanting will take place when seasonably appropriate. Tree replacement plays a vital role in the maintenance of a healthy urban forest.
We started noticing on 21st, there was a cluster of laurel oaks that were all pretty much in the same state of senescence as far as dropping large wood, decaying, and they were on their way out. One or two of the trees in question are live oaks that have been damaged by trucks repeatedly. There are 16 trees that are definite removals, and 2 that I need to assess at height. I need to get in a bucket truck and actually get up in the crowns of the trees and inspect closer.
So it's our job to safely and effectively remove those trees and then plan to replant in that spot to make sure that the next generation of trees is growing in our urban forest. We can't do it alone. With support from the community, we are working together to grow our urban forest. Questions?
Yes, sir.
Good morning. Thank you. Good report. 2 questions. One, how tall will these trees grow when the new ones, when you replant them?
How
Ballpark.
tall will the new trees grow?
Yes.
Wow. So live oak probably are going to reach in the 60 to 80 foot range. Again, because they're in tighter root spaces, they may not reach that full height because of the resources available for soil and water and whatnot.
Okay. And then the second question is, are there many trees like the ones you just showed us? Are there many trees in the city like that?
The
In other
laurel
places?
oaks
Yes.
that are declining. So our urban forest master plan did do a street tree inventory specifically in the 1945 limits. So based on that data, they do represent about 14% of the tree canopy street trees within the 1945 limits. That's where we have the focus of probably most of our large maturing trees. I think it would be a slightly lower percent across the rest of the city, but laurel oaks are certainly native and well represented across the city.
Okay, thank you.
Waddell?
Amy had mentioned that the stumps are going to be ground afterwards, and then, then we'll implement the replacement. I hear a lot of folks from a lot of folks in this exact project area about existing stumps and stump grinding that needs to happen. So I'm wondering if it might be possible to implement or wrap those into this existing project. Go ahead and grind stumps while we have crews out there. I mean, there's a lot of them, big, large stumps in this project area. Is there any plan for that? And then, to do replacement where those existing stumps are, or around in that area. It seems like we could, mitigate some duplication of services and go ahead and knock out a lot of stuff while we have this project in place. I don't know if that had been considered.
Great comment. Yes, there's no doubt that we are behind on stump grinding. Although they are not very visually appealing, a stump is not a safety hazard, and we have been focusing our limited resources on hazards. So there is no doubt that it is a need, and we do have new funding available that we're hoping to dedicate to that. And we do have in-house capability for stump grinding. So we're slowly getting on top of it, but it's going to take us a little while. You're absolutely right. It is, it's high on our list. We realize that it's a priority for the community.
So if we're out there doing a stump grinding we're taking down a tree and then we're grinding that stump, and 100 yards down the road we see another one, we're not going to grind that stump.
Probably not with this specific project because of the logistics that it'll entail with our partnering with NCDOT and shutting down lane miles and the amount of internal resources it's going to take. However, if there is a time that it makes sense, then I think we will take advantage of that. I don't think I can commit to that, but you're absolutely right. If we're able to do it, we will.
Okay. And then I had a question about I think there was some terminology calling a couple of the trees had structural defects. Was the terminology? What does that mean?
So I'd feel great if Kelly Blair could come up. He's our tree crew supervisor, and he can talk to that very technical question.
Okay.
Yep.
Morning.
Structural defects, they can take many forms. You have codominant stems, you could have heart rot. Basically, it's a defect. Can you hear me? Basically, a defect in the tree that's going to affect a load-bearing capacity. So with the laurel oaks, the failure profile is heart rot. That means, of course, it's decaying from the inside out. And that's one thing that I deal with constantly. People see that a tree could have a full canopy of leaves and not realize that it only takes the first 3 growth rings to support the vascular activity of the tree. But over time, as the laurel oaks decay from the inside out, their propensity to drop wood just based on gravitational load, doesn't have to be wind, doesn't have to be water, doesn't have to be storm related. It's just a nice sunny day and it'll drop large wood. So that's the main concern because of the amount of targets on Market Street. So.
Mr. Ron Bark and then Mr. Anderson.
I'm glad you're up here, Mr. Blair, because I have a question. When these, or comment, a lot of these trees were planted when Market Street was just not what it is today, obviously. The rumbling, the damage to the root system, like you said, trucks hitting the limbs. I happened to be on Market Street one morning leaving an agenda briefing at front of the National Cemetery, and one of the limbs, this big, hit the hood of a car. Had it been a millisecond later, it would have gone through his windshield and possibly, grave injury. And I know that there are a number of those out there, and those limbs sometimes can have that rot too, and they can be pushing leaves out, but still have that inner core rot like in some of your pictures. I know that I've dealt with a number of arborists, Bruce Williams, the other guy from NC State, I can't recall his name right now, and once a year, where I take care of trees on Princess Place Drive at Bellevue Cemetery, we go around the drip line with 10-10-10 fertilizer to feed them. And that's impossible with this unless you're using some type of liquid. But when those trees grow out beyond, under, the plaza, I mean, I think we expect too much out of these trees because they're not being fed properly. You can't. So if somebody says that something's 50 to 80 years, I'd take a percentage off that. And these plans to get these trees down, I think, is admirable, and getting trees back in the ground and getting the stumps ground up. But one of the trees that we've had some luck with is a cathedral oak. They tend to, and in a tight spot like this with the canopy, they tend to grow up more conical than out. Is that something that's ever considered? And to be honest, I don't know if it has the same bad reputation or has the same longevity or problems that a laurel oak does. I don't know that, but they are pretty.
Is that a cultivar of the live oak?
Pardon me, sir?
Is that a southern live oak? Is that, I'm not familiar with cathedral oak.
Okay.
I just,
End of question then. No
it
problem.
could be a type of live oak, which just has a different growing habit than the really wide canopy.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Anderson?
How to use this. Can you slide through? I'll tell you when to stop. Okay, one more? Well, we can go back to that one. Just use that one. Go back, okay. Well, let's just say the one on the left, but I can see the rot in that one. There, you can see the tops falling out of it or what have you, the one on the left. But there were one or two that you're kind of looking at it going, oh, could we just trim that limb? I'm thinking from a public perception standpoint. Is there a test, like if this lower part looks good? I mean, you bore it, or is it just kind of a experience thing or how, they're going to say, well, how did they decide? And now when you take it down and it's hollow,
Right.
you can show them, but and hopefully these will all show that way. There's won't leave much doubt in people's minds. But I'm just asking, is there any kind of test other than just experience with the tree?
There are tests, what we would term advanced tests for advanced risk assessment. They have tomography, which is basically using sound waves to measure the decay in the tree. It'll measure the integrity that's left in the wood in the tree. There's the resist graph. You can drill with that.
So are these things you have that you can use, or these are super expensive and
it's-
something outside of what we have?
Tomography is very expensive, and we would have to call in a contractor from outside. The problem with tomography is that you basically are sounding the trunk, and that is just basically one part of the tree. The decay that we're seeing in the laurel oaks, it's like I said before, if you have 3 growth rings and you have leaves on the canopy, the public is going to ask, why are you taking down such a
Right.
healthy, nice-looking tree? Well, there's roughly 6 species of fungi that are extremely aggressive, that are attacking laurel oaks. And most of them, they're not just saprophytes, they don't just eat dead wood, they're actually able to attack live wood as well. So any wound in a laurel oak it's a vector for infection. So these trees are diseased. It's not just that the tree is being eaten by carpenter ants, or they have a fungal infection that cannot be treated. And
Let me rephrase then.
sure.
So, I mean, if I'm average citizen who hadn't gotten this presentation from you, and I'm looking at the picture on the left and the picture in the middle, and it's pretty clear the one on the right, I mean, okay, take it down. The other one, somebody says, top that out. Are we gonna do any kind of testing? Not is there testing available, or is it just really an experience call from seeing what happens with these trees?
It's an experience call.
Okay.
Unless you deal with this day in, day out, you just don't understand. You
Right.
have not seen that the decay can manifest throughout the entire crown. It could manifest as a hollow, or it could be solid and punky wood, what we call white rot. It's just mush. And, or it could be in the trunk, it can be in the roots. So,
All right, thank you. I have a question for Sally, too, and she may defer again, but, so don't go far. So like, I wonder, do we ever consider doing something kind of like, almost like we do with a rezoning? I mean, like in a situation like this, it might be worth putting a little signage out there. And I don't know if we're capable of QR codes or something like that, where you QR code it and they can, I don't know, go to this presentation or see your little video deal, you know, something like that. I think would, you know, how many people actually use it, I don't know, but at least they wouldn't be a surprise seeing the signs. And it's just a thought, because I think this number of trees, we're all going to get calls, everybody's going to get calls, and maybe it cuts it down by 50%, you know, and plus it's proactive. I like when we're proactive instead of, you know, coming afterwards, oh, we should have told you. Shoulda, I don't like, you know, let's try something like that. Different subject, but it was funny, it was in your video, and I've been meaning to ask. On Racine, I don't know what those are. They're laurels? I mean, no, they're, what are they?
I think they're live oaks.
No, they're, well, they're planted, I thought it was odd, they're planted about 3 feet apart. There's 4 of them, there's rows of 4 of them, like 3-4 feet apart on Racine. They're in your video. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like near, like the side of Home Depot, going to the county building.
Right, that was part of the tree initiative, and those were sponsored by Audi. I can't tell you what type of trees they are off the top of my head, but I drive by them all the time.
I've never seen any tree of any kind
There's various.
planted that close together. And so when they plant them, even though they're sponsored, and several of them, I don't know if, you know, there's some bars along there, a little further down the street, but where they've been hit by cars or pulled over. I mean, when that happens, do we replace them, or is that, how does it work?
When the city removes a tree, we replace the tree, not necessarily at the same time, because we have planting seasons. If
Well,
a
it's about like
tree
new
is,
plantings, like something that's new.
if we don't know about it, then we don't go out there and replant it. But if somebody brings it to our attention, then it's something that we would consider as we have the resources to get to it. We would probably look to one of our partners, like the Alliance for Cape Fear Trees. They receive multiple grant awards a year for new tree plantings, and we would ask that that be included in one of their programs.
So the people from Audi went out and dug those and planted those.
No, they provided the funding for them, and the city and volunteers went out there and planted them.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm just, I'd
I'll
be
get you
curious.
an answer
I mean,
on
I'll
why
go
they
take
were
a,
planted
it's on
that
that
way.
video, but I'll go take a picture. I mean, they're 3 or 4 feet apart. That's just very, I mean, they're just going to grow all day. Anyway.
I'll get you an answer
All right.
as to why they were planted
All right.
that way. And I
Okay.
love your idea about the signage with the QR code. I think that's definitely something that we could explore doing. We have the capability, so I don't see why we couldn't do it. You also mentioned taking pictures of the trees after the removal. It's often a good educational tool, and we'll be doing that as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to go back to Luke's point for a second. I have received, I know we all have over time, a number of calls about the stumps. And I know a lot of these stumps were due to the Hurricane Florence 5 years ago. They're still out there. And I was just wondering if you Chad and Tony could give us a price as to what that would cost in the 1945 corporate city limits where we have a lot of these stumps down, or where we have these stumps out there. If we could look at what it would cost to remove them now, and depending on the size of the bid, maybe we could phase it in, but it needs to be done. And where those stumps are, it should be replaced with a tree. If we really want to get ahead of this tree canopy issue, especially in the 1945 corporate city limits, we need to really start working and getting rid of these stumps. And I think, and you know, I've seen where the people are parking, where these stumps are sitting in the street right of way. People are having to go around them. They're having to exit their car on the other side. I've seen it and I've heard it many, many times, and I keep saying we're going to get to it. But obviously, there's not funding there to do it, and we need to get on it.
We do have, with the newly adopted budget, we do have money for a contract for stump grinding. So we do intend to get out there aggressively at it. This past year, the city's internal stump grinder that we own was out of commission for months and months. We also, as you know, at one point were down. We only had 2 of our 9 tree crew positions filled, so this contract is important. I think the Urban Forestry Management Plan highlighted how important contracted work is. When they looked at our budget and they looked at our personnel and looked at benchmarks, we have the right amount of personnel, but it looks like other cities have much greater funding for contracts. And so that's something that we need to continue to look at in future budget years. And I think to Councilmember Waddell's point, yeah, I think that if we're in a neighborhood and we know that there's a stump, you know, on Gray Street or Chestnut Street just a block over, I think it would be efficient to go ahead and get those stumps looked at and taken care of.
Do we know how many are out there? I mean, because there's a bunch. I mean, you can go down anywhere in town, you can see them everywhere.
Right.
What I'm saying, Amy, is I'd just like to see if we can just find out how many are out there and then figure out what it's going to cost to remove them. 5 years is long enough, and a lot of them have probably been rotted somewhat anyway, so you can probably get rid of some of these things fairly easily. But I just really like to get a contract price, so if we wanted to move more aggressively on this, we can, and start replacing those trees that we lost during Hurricane Florence, which we have not done.
We'll get you a number.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir.
So our stump grinder, it's back in commission?
It is.
Okay, so that was a parts issue, or why did it take so long? I'm just curious.
It's supply chain issues. I hate using that old phrase, but it's the truth. And we are looking at redundancy so that if that happens again, how can we continue to work? I think we had some difference of opinion from our technical staff on how deep a stump grinding task should be. If you don't go down to a depth enough that's appropriate, then you'll have the tree trying to grow back again. We have internally come to a consensus on what that standard is, and so I think that makes it much easier to go out and get a contractor to do it. They typically don't grind as deep as the city would, but I think it's deep enough that we can go ahead with those contracts. Again, trying to find ways for redundancy so when equipment fails, we can continue to work.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Luke?
I don't want to beat the heck out of this thing, but I think it is important. We do have a plan in place to start with a stump grinder out there. So just from an efficiency standpoint, if we could get a map of the existing stumps, you may have it. We get a map of the existing stumps, pretty easy then to back in on what the price is going to be and see whether or not it's something, you know, we can stomach to just go ahead and get done with the existing project or right after the existing project. Just makes a lot of sense. So that's the end of my stump speech.
Oh my! We'll get a map accompanied with the numbers.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Said all that just to say the last part.
Second presentation we have for you this morning is an annual update from UNCW CIE. Mr. Aubrey Parsley is going to introduce our speaker.
Good morning, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. This morning we have an update for you from one of our civic partnership grant recipients, UNCW-CIE. As you see on the slide here, just to refresh everyone's memory, most of our civic grants are now on a 3-year cycle. We have a few that are on a 5-year cycle. UNCW-CIE is on a 3-year cycle. They just completed the first of their contractual 3-year grant cycle here, and last year when we went through the application process, council expressed an interest in hearing an update from them, and they have a great update for you this morning. From a contractual standpoint, CIE's goals as it relates to performance of the grant really focuses on jobs and capital, and they've done a tremendous job over the last year of building out the infrastructure to be able to track how their entrepreneurial support services are able to produce jobs and produce capital investment. So with that, let me not take any thunder away from Ms. Heather McWhorter, the UNCW-CIE's Executive Director, and she'll take it from here. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Nice to see you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of council. My name is Heather McWhorter, Director of Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. I just closed out my first year as the CIE Director and 6th year as a UNCW employee, so it's nice to be here with you. Providing an update, a quick update about CIE. As you know, CIE does a whole bunch of things, but Aubrey asked me to keep it at 15 minutes or under, so I'm going to do a quick flyover and focus on a couple of entrepreneurs so you know what's going on in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Why do we care about entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship is a tool that empowers individuals. It helps to get them ready for jobs. It keeps our businesses competitive. It helps to attract talent. It brings new ideas to market. It is a very powerful tool. Wilmington is on the map internationally. We are ranked #1 in the nation as a startup community for cities 300,000 and less. We are powerful in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. We did publish a strategic plan this year. We have 5 main goals that we're working on. We're working on, of course, helping our entrepreneurs. Another big part of what we do is supporting student success. We're thinking about the 18,000 students at UNCW and how we can empower them through entrepreneurship, maybe starting businesses, but also being our next great employees of the region through skills that entrepreneurship brings to them. That middle one, building an entrepreneurial talent pipeline. Many of you know about our youth summit that we have every year, where hundreds of high school students come to participate in a Shark Tank-like competition, a pep rally, if you will, because I believe entrepreneurship is for everyone, and I want them to believe that too. Catalyzing inclusivity in high-impact startups. Something that I think we as a region and we as a nation have a really far way to go. And advancing the innovation economy in our region. And that's where our blue economy comes in, advancing tech in our region comes in. We have a lot of different initiatives. So as a reminder, we are a facility and we are a program. We have a nice facility right off of College, right outside of CIE's gates. On College, free parking right outside that makes it convenient for entrepreneurs to gather. We have a startup incubator, co-working space, and more. And then we have tons of programs, and we are very collaborative and work with our partners so that all can succeed in our community. So one big thing that I heard last year from you is that you wanted to hear, you really wanted me to focus on tracking entrepreneurs. So we have a CRM now to track entrepreneurs in our community and investors. So I went above and beyond. And so I feel a little bit like I have a Maserati and I'm learning to drive stick shift. But it's a nice system. And through that now, I can track when we build an entrepreneur and they move out of the region. That's something that you want to know about, right? When we help an entrepreneur and they add jobs in our community, how much capital they're growing. So this year, I tracked $25 million of capital that our entrepreneurs raised and 50 jobs created in our community. We helped 230 entrepreneurs. Now, of that, we have about 19 incubator tenants. Again, we're facility and programs. About 35% of our entrepreneurs are women, and about 22% minority. Again, where I'm talking about we have a ways to go in that high-impact startup community. We have almost 200 volunteers that care about our mission, and that's how we get a lot of our work done. 700 UNCW students engaged, that's double what we did last year, and 1,000 K through 12 students, again about double what we did last year, and 7,500 event participants. Quick snapshot of CIE tenants, who's in our building. We have some new startups in our building. 2 new logos there for you are Athean and Visor at that bottom left corner. Those 2 are people that used to work at Encino. And so you might be reading articles about how companies like Encino's create other startups. That's an example for you, and they're located in CIE. Upper right corner, you will see a logo that is an owl, and you might be wondering, who's that? So let me tell you who that is. So the woman there in the center, her name is Rochelle McCrae. She is a first-time entrepreneur. She contacted CIE. She knows consumer tech. She used to work at QVC for several years. And she had a problem that she was trying to solve. She's taking on food waste from your refrigerator. She has developed prototypes that can track their smart containers with a smartphone interface so that you know what to eat first out of your refrigerator. So she has received 1 of 9 federal grants from ReFed, $250,000 grant. She has already received an SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Grant from EPA, and a $50,000 match grant, 1NC, from the state. She's just getting started. She's a smart entrepreneur. So you're thinking, who's going to buy these smart containers? It's a very specific demographic. She understands consumers, but she's just getting started. She sees something bigger in the future that I'll update you about in the future. So that's one of our entrepreneurs that we're helping. Also exciting because she's woman high-growth entrepreneur, something that we're trying to attract. In that picture, you will also see Dave Reeser. He's at the forefront from Opioid. Many of you may know him already. He is taking on the opioid crisis through data analytics, through existing wearables. They can take that data and crunch it and flag if somebody's going into relapse. He also has received funding this year. He was part of a $2.8 million NIDA grant with UNCW as a partner and received an NC IDEA seed grant. By the way, NC IDEA will be at CIE talking about their next round of grants today. They're offering free pizza if anybody wants to come. Always open. Also on that last slide, I had a logo to remind myself one of the things that we're doing for the city is business resiliency. And I believe that resiliency is really important in these high-growth startups. And somebody got the word, and I was invited to talk at an international conference about that earlier this year. And so I did showcase what we are doing in the city at an international conference. I do believe that building resiliency will lead to inclusivity, and that's why I believe it's so powerful. One more entrepreneur to talk about. At the Coastal Entrepreneur Awards this year, If you haven't been, I would love to have you all attend. We hold that at the UNCW each year. It's in partnership with the Greater Wilmington Business Journal. It's a fantastic celebration each year of our entrepreneurial community. The community votes and nominates different entrepreneurs. This year's top entrepreneur was Paul Barron from The Wall Printer. He's on Oleander Drive. He has about 15 employees. So Paul is one of the first entrepreneurs I met when I moved to town. He's a serial entrepreneur, which I love. And this is his grand finale. And he's a technology scout. So he purchased this technology from another country, and he owns all North America and South America. And every time he sells a wall printer from Oleander Drive, the person that buys it starts a business. So he has sold 100 wall printers and therefore created 100 businesses. So he, in and of himself, is a startup machine. He's also a CIE mentor on the entrepreneurship board at UNCW, and an all-around great guy. I mentioned we're not on an island by ourselves. All entrepreneurs take a whole team to help them get started. The entrepreneurial community takes a whole community to be successful. So I can't stand up here without showing these logos and then some. So of course we have the Wilmington Coalition, which is strong. It's very collaborative, and it is unique to Wilmington that all of the partners in entrepreneurship and small business development all get together and collaborate. One slide on community engagement. It's something very important that we do, always trying to fill that pipeline and inspire people to control their destiny, to develop that entrepreneurial mindset that we call, and to experiment with design thinking. So as I close out my presentation, I just wanted to invite you. We always have programs going on at CIE. Every Wednesday, 9 a.m., an entrepreneur's talking about what they have going on, and the community provides suggestions. It's called 1 Million Cups. Also a free cup of coffee. September 7th, I hope that you all received your invitations to our 10-year anniversary. The Wilmington Chamber is helping us with that. That is the celebration of our ribbon cutting. So we will be having a celebration that evening. September 19th, our first ever Ocean Innovation Conference. We're really excited about that. That will be an all-day conference, bringing in some great keynotes. And that is the counter to the Global Marine Science Summit that's in the spring. This one's really talking about job creation and turning all of that knowledge and problem solving into jobs. And thank you for your support, and I'll take any questions now.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you said we're ranked, is ranked number 1 in the nation. Is that Wilmington, or that's North Carolina, right?
The Wilmington, by Startup Blink, is ranked number 1 in the nation as an emerging startup community.
Okay, all right, Wilmington. Okay, that's good news.
Yeah.
That is definitely good news. Okay, so my other question is, you did a breakdown for some of the data, and you had 35% women and 22% minority.
Yes.
So in that 22% minority, is that true minorities, or is that also women being included as minorities too? Because we know that that can happen as well.
That does not include women.
Okay, so 22% out of 250?
Could you say the question again?
Was that 22% of the 250? Was that was the number, right?
22% of the 230.
230, okay, sorry.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
all right, cool, thank you. Well, I mean, 35% and 22%, that's about half, so that's,
Well, there
Not too
could be
bad.
overlap then. There could be a woman and a minority. So there could be double counting in that number.
that's the question I was
Oh, okay, okay. I understand now. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Anderson?
So, Heather, thanks for coming, and thanks for the presentation. We've had, I don't know how many, we've had a number of leaders, and they all seem to have pretty similar vision, but I've not, kind of, what's your financial model? Is it mostly UNCW support? Is that like 80%? I mean, what's just ballpark numbers? They're kind of 90% or 80%?
It's about 40% UNCW, about 40% what we raise through our incubator memberships, sponsorships, and about 20% grants, including the city.
So the incubator, I remember at one, this goes back to the origin of the thing, so it's evolved a lot since then, but there was, so some tenants, once they get to a certain stage, like, I don't know, there's probably, I'm sure you have terminology for that, but say they've been there, the senior tenants, they pay some rent or not? At one point, we were told this was going to be a self-supportive incubator.
Yes.
And I think that's evolved over time and kind of not a goal anymore. Is that correct? Or a attainable goal, let me put it that way.
I think with everything we do for the community, the incubator might be a self-sufficient model in and of itself, but we do a lot more than just the incubator.
Okay. And so are we, the city's what, like less than 1%, 1%? What would we be even, would we even register?
20%, of that 20%, I would say half of that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anybody else? Just in respect to the UNCW's Marine Biology Center out on Myrtle Grove, how much interaction or in respect to, I know they've had many conferences there in respect to how do you take this knowledge and technology that has been created out there and create jobs with it?
Yeah.
And how much interaction is there between the CIE and the Marine, the Center for Marine Biology there?
There's a lot of interaction. I talk with the director there, Ken Halanich, at least weekly. We collaborated on the NSF Engines grant for the region. That is, we're looking at creating a prospective engine to commercialize more technologies around solving climate and other sea level rise issues. And so I would say we're talking all the time.
So the oyster farms that have been created along the intercoastal waterway, and we get complaints from time to time, even though that is the jurisdiction of the state in respect to where they put these farms. None of that falls under the CIE's umbrella, or is that completely just entrepreneurs out there getting leases from the state, doing their own thing, or is there some collaboration between you folks, the Marine Center, and what's happening out there in the field that we're seeing, or I'm seeing?
That's a great question. With the Living Shoreline Initiative, we do have a scientist in residence who is at Center for Marine Science and CIE, that when an entrepreneur comes to me, because we're the outreach arm that helps entrepreneurs that needs help with we would call it a blue economy startup like that, I would have our scientist in residence help because he has that expertise. We have also just launched an asynchronous class for oyster growers. It's called Propel. That's free for anybody in the community that combines the technical aspects of locating and operating a oyster growing business, mariculture business, with the business side. And so that, of course, is where CIE was teaching people how to start a business.
Do we know how many farmers that are out there right now? I would imagine it goes up and down from topsoil, North topsoil, all the way down to almost to the mouth of the river. Do we have any idea?
He knows. I could get back to you with an answer.
I'd just like to know, because I'm beginning to see a lot of these.
Yeah.
And it seems like they're getting leases from the state, and I know that money goes to the state of North Carolina, but also it generates, of course, a lot of oysters, I would imagine, for this area. I would imagine for some restaurants and some folks here, but, you know, I'd like to know how many are out there, because there seems to be a heck of a lot of them, and more growing every single day.
I think there's a lot of potential for that area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Yes, sir. Mr.
Yeah,
Barnett.
good morning, Heather.
Good morning.
About the Ocean Innovation Convocation or Conference, I attempted to register for that, and the challenge that I had was that it was saying, do you want to be a new student, and do you want to take a class? And I was kind of confused with, can I just register for the luncheon, or do I need to come to the whole day? And I was very interested in that because, as you know, we're right here at the ocean.
Yeah.
And we've got to figure out what we're going to do.
If anyone has problems registering, just contact me directly, and I can just put you in the system because it's not the most user-friendly system.
Okay, so put me in the system.
I will, yes, I
Thank
will.
you.
We'll get you registered.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Anything else?
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the final presentation we have for you this morning is an overview of Land Development Code amendments that'll be coming before council on August 15th by Ms. Linda Painter.
Good morning, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of council. As Mr. McEwen mentioned, the presentation before you this morning is for proposed amendments to the Land Development Code. This is part of our commitment for ongoing review and adjustments as we encounter issues during implementation. I will note that as staff proposes amendments, the priority for us is doing what is in the public interest while also responding to concerns that are raised as we are implementing the regulations. We are proposing 3 amendments as part of this cycle. The first one deals with cross-access requirements for commercial parking lots. The second and third are related, but are being processed as separate amendments, and they deal with shade coverage requirements as well as parking lot landscaping. The first amendment before you, commercial parking lot access, this is a new requirement that was adopted as part of the December 2021 Land Development Code, and it requires that as new development comes in or any changes to existing development comes in and that is non-residential in nature, that the parking lots be connected. And that requirement was intended to limit vehicle conflicts on roadways and provide drivers with the ability to make multiple stops without the need to enter traffic. And if you look at the aerial image on your screen, that's one example when you just have driveway after driveway coming out, but you have no ability to make multiple stops. You're just constantly turning out onto roadways. One of the things that staff has noticed as we have been implementing this is that because it applies to all non-residential development, it is applying regardless of the type of street that development is on. And so it's not something that's necessarily needed or practical along some of our smaller streets and our secondary collectors. There was also no threshold in terms of what would trigger the requirement. So basically anything coming through the technical review committee would trigger this requirement if it was non-residential in nature. And so we wanted to look at this and say, this is something we really need to look at based on the scale of what is coming in terms of new development. We also had no administrative relief provisions in case the requirement just didn't make sense. And we didn't provide any detail on associated access easements that would be needed with this type of access. So the proposed amendment does several things. One, it would limit applicability to corridors that are currently subject to our specific frontage requirements. There is one exception to that, and that is Wrightsville Avenue, because those requirements are already so specific, we did not feel the need to add additional cross-access for that corridor. It would only apply to new principal buildings or to additions that are 50% or greater of the existing gross floor area on the site. We have also established administrative relief, and there are several criteria that are identified in the regulations. And if a project comes in and meets one of those, myself as the planning director, as well as the city engineer working together, can modify or eliminate that requirement in cases where it just simply does not make sense. And additionally, as noted, we added the requirements pertaining to easements associated with the interconnections. And I will say, in doing this, we did benchmark other communities across the state and took a lot of the regulations and the administrative relief provisions from those other communities that have been doing this successfully. The Second Amendment deals with shading requirements. As you know from the adoption of the Urban Forestry Master Plan, the city has seen an overall canopy decrease from 48.1% in 2016 to 41.4% in 2021. That decrease has been attributed primarily to Hurricane Florence, private development, and the natural mortality of large mature trees. The top issue raised by the public during that process was the loss of trees due to development, and the plan therefore contains a specific recommendation that the city update codes and regulations to incentivize private tree protection and preservation. In addition to the concerns that were identified as part of the Urban Forestry Master Plan, we also had feedback from the development community regarding both shading and parking lot landscaping and some of the challenges that they were encountering. Specifically, when it comes to shading, there was a miscommunication or misunderstanding of what the requirement was. So our intent was that shading requirements apply to impervious parking lot and vehicular use area surfaces. We would not consider building roofs and other impervious surfaces towards the shading requirements. That was not understood by some of our applicants, so when they were calculating their shade coverage, they were including buildings and all impervious surfaces, even though our focus was solely on parking lots. The second one, and on the next slide, I'll talk about the sliding scale. So when the new code was adopted in December of 2021, our shade coverage requirements were based on the size of your property as well as whether you were located within the 1945 corporate limits or outside the 1945 corporate limits. One of the issues that has come up with the development community is that they felt the larger sites, as you can see, if you're over 100,000 square feet in size, you had the highest requirement for shading, and as the property got smaller, your shading requirements went down. They saw that as being inequitable because the larger your site, the more trees you're putting in to begin with in terms of the overall installation of tree canopy. And last, but certainly not least, was an indication that we needed to provide more flexibility in how both shade coverage and our parking lot landscaping requirements are met. So based on that feedback and working with a couple of the members of the Planning Commission, as well as taking input from members of the development community, staff has proposed a few amendments to both shading and parking lot landscaping. The first one would eliminate this sliding scale table that you see on your screen and instead go with a flat shade coverage requirement of 15% inside the 1945 corporate limits and 30% outside the 1945 corporate limits. We did go with the two highest percentages based on the Urban Forestry Master Plan and what came out in terms of the need to provide shade coverage. In terms of the actual how we calculate the shade coverage, presently what you'll see highlighted in the table is we provide 707 square feet of shade coverage for a canopy tree, 314 square feet of coverage for an understory tree, and note that if you are along the perimeter, we are only going to give you credit for the portion of the tree that's actually shading the parking lot. We are proposing to replace that with a new table 18-318 as shown on the screen. And the purpose for doing this is, one, it provides specifics of how much shade coverage you will receive based on whether you are along the edge of the parking lot, on a corner island, an interior island, or a median. And you'll also notice that we are now adding different numbers if you are preserving a tree. So that goes to the incentivizing saving existing trees. So we would provide higher levels of credit for preserving a tree in terms of calculating it towards shade coverage than installing a new tree. Yep.
Yes, sir.
On that, this one, yes. Two, do we, you know, if you plant a bunch of trees and then every year you prune them so they never grow, I mean, all this is for naught. How do we self-enforce that, or somebody got to call us?
I would guess it's probably a call. I mean, they are supposed to maintain these per the technical standards and their landscape plan. But if
Well,
we see-
maintain to some of them means with crepe myrtle that we're going to cut it down to absolutely nothing every single year and you have a stick there. So we're kind of like, I mean, our crepe myrtles, which one of these? They're,
I believe they're an understory tree.
I don't know, it just seems, go to all this work and make all these requirements. I don't know, maybe it's old properties where does it apply to old property, or is this new development only?
These requirements come in when you're coming in with new development. So
Right.
as you're going through the project, the process, this is how we would calculate the shading requirements to get you to that 15% or 30% of shading of your parking lot area.
So I think of places like, well, you can think of, say, some of those properties over there, say, what's the center, Charlie, where Henry's is, what is that called? Where Henry's restaurant is? Barclay. It looks great. You know, it's got the trees. I mean, it's just a really good, then you'll see a shopping center, and I can't really, Hanover Center or somewhere where they just, every year it's just, there's never any shade. It doesn't never come to fruition. So I don't know how we do that, but, all right, thanks.
Well, like, for example, Dillard's, where they are, when they redeveloped, they allowed themselves to fall back into current tree regulations and went back to the old part of the shopping center and put trees up, and they'll mature. Hanover Shopping Center, I know that when they redid that, they planted more trees in there than there was there before. The one that stands out so much was the old Kmart. It's just a sea of asphalt, and nothing ever got done there, but redevelopment, these things, that triggers these as well.
Yes.
Okay. And we'll see a lot of that.
So, and that actually is a good transition into the third amendment, which deals specifically with parking lot landscaping. So the prior amendment is really about what the percentage of your parking lot has to be shaded, and how we're going to calculate that shade coverage. And this talks about the placement of those trees within the parking lot itself. So under our current code, we require that you have a landscape island no further apart than 12 parking spaces, and that includes along the perimeter of your parking lot. So while you may have trees along the edge of the parking lot, we are also requiring that you have islands at least every 12 spaces, and you must have a canopy tree within those islands. As part of the 2021 update, we also added a minimum soil volume requirement of 1,000 cubic yards for all islands, and that was really to make sure that these trees had the necessary soil to thrive as best as they can. I think you heard Sally earlier this morning talk about the difficulties that trees face in urban environments. So this really was an attempt for us to try and make sure that as we're planting trees in a harsh environment with a lot of impervious coverage, that we are giving them the adequate soil volume. And this is, I think the 12 parking spaces as well as the soil volume is something that has been raised as a challenge as developers are coming in, particularly as they are trying to meet housing demands, create new units, and they're looking at the landscaping requirements saying, we can't get the number of parking spaces we need to support the units because this is just too inflexible in terms of how we meet those requirements and the shading.
Can I ask you a question with regard, you just mentioned harsh environment, time of the year. Do we still allow someone to post bond if they're building in July, or if they don't have irrigation, do we still allow the bond and then plant it in the fall?
I believe so. I'm going to defer to Brian, who is giving me a nod yes that we allow them to do that. So the proposed amendment is really intended to provide additional flexibility while still maintaining the shade coverage and having parking spaces within a certain distance of a canopy tree. So the first thing we are proposing to do is to eliminate the requirement that says you must locate an island every 12 spaces, and instead change that to a mathematical formula that says you have to provide at least one tree for every 12 parking spaces. At least 75% of those trees must be canopy trees, and Each parking space must be located within 70 feet of a canopy tree. So we're not telling you where you have to put that. The parking space has to be within that distance of a canopy tree, but we're not going to tell you that you have to have an island every 12 spaces. If you look at the diagram that we've put on there, we're recognizing that you can put those trees along the perimeter. We do require that you have end islands, so anytime you have a parking row, you do have to have end islands. That requirement has not changed, but you could use a median through in the middle there to get that shade coverage without taking up what could be a potential parking space with a landscape island. We are also, when it comes to soil volume, providing some flexibility. We recognize that the 1,000 cubic yards, while it is important for a canopy tree, an understory tree does not require that type of soil volume, so we are adding a lower volume for understory trees. We are clarifying that the soil volume requirements require root accessible and not compacted soils, and will also credit soils that are located under pervious pavement that are adjoining the island or median towards the volume requirement. And in so doing, a developer can actually reduce the size of the island, have more space for parking as long as that surface is permeable, because we know that underneath that permeable surface, we're going to have the root accessible soils that are needed for those trees. That also will then reduce the island size. We did specify a minimum island size, which is about 7.5 feet wide by 19 feet long. And that is it, unless you have any questions.
Yes, sir.
Dylan, could you just roll back? Well, that works, any of them works. Was there thought given to, and I know sometimes you don't want to make this some kind of, gymnastics event for the developer, but did we think about, you did it in the one before, sort of, like if you have an existing tree, mature tree, does that get any, if you leave, does that give you any more credit than planting a new tree?
Yes. So that is part of the shade coverage proposal, where right now, regardless of whether it's an existing or a proposed tree, we're giving you a flat 707 square feet of shade coverage for a canopy tree or 314 square feet for an understory tree. Under the proposed requirements, if you're keeping a canopy tree in an interior island, you'll get 900 square feet of credit. So we are trying to incentivize keeping trees in islands. We also have the ability, whenever you're trying to retain trees, to move things around and adjust setbacks and other items to help preserve trees.
But with an Amendment 3, does that, these work together, I guess.
They work together.
But that would not allow, like that spacing, you're doing away with it altogether. So my thought was, prior to seeing that, when I follow the next slide, the first slide, right, that one is, I don't care where, if you had a mature tree after 4 spaces, then, average it or something, but you're just, what you're doing is just taking that out and entirely.
We're taking out the requirement that you have an island every 12 spaces, but we are requiring that a canopy tree be within 70 feet of every parking space. So if they can design their islands and medians around existing trees, that is what would be preferred, and they would get additional shade coverage credit for doing that.
So how wide is a parking space?
I believe it's 9 feet.
I can't see that well.
9.
9, so okay. All right, so it's still about 6 or 7.
Yeah, you could also go, again, that's the median, you could go across, it could be a perimeter space. So it just provides a little bit more flexibility in order to balance the need for shade coverage with what we're seeing in terms of demand for parking.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. I do. Yes, sir, Mr. Rambo.
Is this cleanup, is this staff-driven, or is this someone bringing this forward?
So Amendment 1 was staff-driven in terms of the cross-access. Amendments 2 and 3 were in response to issues that were raised by the development community.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Mayor, that's all the presentations we have for you this morning.
Mr. Mayor, we do have a request for a closed session. You have that motion up there for you. We'd also ask you to add, in addition to sections A1 and A4, a motion for section A5, which involves the city's negotiation position with regard to real property.
Okay.
You looking for a motion, Meredith?
Yes, sir, the mayor's got the motion.
Okay, so there's a motion to enter into a closed session pursuant to provisions of North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A and 3 and A and 4 in order for the city council to, number one, consult with and provide instruction to the city attorney regarding potential legal claims, and two, discuss the matters relating to the location or expansion of industries in the area served by the public body, and A5.
And A5 to discuss the city's negotiation position in a matter of real property disposition.
Okay, very good. So Mr. Anderson made the motion.
Second.
Second by Mr. Ravenbark. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we are now going to go to
I'm
closed session.
sorry, Mr. Mayor. I think you need to do a roll call vote.
Okay. Mr. Waddell, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Barnett, how do you vote? Okay. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, how do you vote? Ms. Ravenbark, how do you vote? Aye. Mr. Anderson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Spears, how do you vote?
No.
Okay. And then chair is aye. Okay. We're now going to closed session.